A flashback shows a man sitting alone, typing furiously on his computer. He diligently enters numbers into a spreadsheet. As he works, his gaze occasionally drifts to a paper envelope. He pauses, toying with the envelope. Suddenly, pain shoots through his chest, and he clutches his heart. Soon after, the pain appears to subside, and he grabs some water. The relief is short-lived. The pain returns, causing him to burst into uncontrollable spasms. He shouts in agony and writhes across the floor before passing away. Next, a man named Lockhart rides a train, restlessly amending those same numbers while frustratedly talking to his coworker Josh. After hanging up the phone, he glimpses the envelope on the seat beside him. It is torn open. Lockhart fidgets before finally deciding to read the letter. The letter talks about his firm and the hollow nature of their work. It reflects on how they are all slowly becoming unwell. The man who wrote it is on the search for a cure for his illness and does not want to be contacted again. This man is named Roland Pembrook. As Lockhart ponders the letter, a flashback shows him being celebrated for his work on Reynolds' account. He is called into the partners' boardroom. The partners question Lockhart about Roland's letter, dismissing its sentiments with mockery. In the meeting, Lockhart's boss, Hank Green, emphasizes the importance of a merger currently underway. Hank and the other partners accuse Lockhart of fudging the numbers, implying that he could face jail time. Remaining composed, Lockhart counters that the mere fact he isn't behind bars suggests that the SEC is pursuing someone higher up, possibly even a board member. Lockhart suggests that Roland could be the perfect scapegoat for this. However, the partners need Roland's signature to finalize the merger. It is then revealed that the man who was seen dead earlier was Morris, the man the board would have initially sent to collect Roland. However, now Lockhart is assigned the task of bringing Roland back to New York. In the present, Lockhart drives up to a wellness center. As he gets closer, his laptop begins to glitch and dies. Lockhart remembers his goodbye to his mother, who mentioned that this work-obsessed mindset he has is what killed his father. She presents him with a delicate ballerina figurine, a symbol of grace and beauty. In conversation with his driver, Lockhart discovers that there is animosity between the villagers and the people on the hill. As they enter the property, the driver tells Lockhart that the property dates back to the time of the barons and belonged to the von Reichmanns. The driver further unveils that the last baron had an obsession with keeping his bloodline pure and chose his sister to carry his child. When ostracized by the church, he renounced God. As a result, the villagers chased Baron and his wife down to the catacombs and burned his wife and palace to the ground. As Lockhart drives deeper into the grounds of the wellness center, he finds senior citizens clad in white, engaged in recreational activities. He enters the premises to meet Pembrook, but he is shown the visiting hours sign and asked to come later. After pulling a Karen and threatening to call the manager, he is asked to sign a form. Pulling out his phone, Lockhart discovers that there is no cellular signal in the area. It is said to be part of the treatment. Lockhart continues to try to cellular coverage, but is distracted by a croquet ball, which leads him to a window of the ancient catacombs. Lockhart remembers the driver's tale in his head and wonders whether it's true. Next, Lockhart meets Dr. Peterson and asks him to make an exception and allow him to meet Pembrook. He watches as the doctor ingests droplets from a delicate blue bottle, which he explains are vitamins. Dr. Peterson comments that the director of the facility, Dr. Vollmer, is very firm about limiting exposure to the stressors of the modern world. Lockhart observes that the facility uses something called hydrotherapy. Dr. Peterson points out that the sanitarium is built over an ancient aquifer with uniquely rejuvenating qualities. Peterson suggests Lockhart write a note to Pembroke which could be passed along, but this makes Lockhart snap. After offering him a glass of water from an antique tap in his office, Peterson reluctantly agrees. He says Lockhart can see Pembroke at 7. Lockhart drives back to a hotel. As he drives through the spiraling roads of the sanitarium, he notices a young girl standing barefoot on the ledge. Next, Lockhart and his driver get into a car accident and crash into a deer. When he wakes up, Lockhart finds himself back at the sanitarium with his leg in a plaster cast. He is awakened by a nurse and Dr. Heinrich Vollmer, who reveals that Lockhart has been there for 3 days. Vollmer reveals that Lockhart's office has been informed of the accident, and they agreed that he should stay here for a while, which puzzles Lockhart. Vollmer continues to explain the peculiarities of the wellness center and its unconventional treatments. He advises Lockhart to relax and ensure that he drinks plenty of water to acclimatize to the altitude. Confused, Lockhart wanders to the window and observes the residents playing croquet. As he passes through the halls, he sees residents absorbed in various aquatic activities, including water aerobics, deep water swimming, and steam baths. While making his way down a staircase, he is noticed by a nurse who promptly asks him where he is supposed to be. Lockhart claims he is lost and cleverly says his name is Pembrook. The nurse informs him that he was residing in room 609 and is currently meant to be taking a steam bath session. As Lockhart finds his way to the steam baths, he finds residents being hosed down and massaged. Noticing a woman and a patient coming out of a doorway in the hall, Lockhart ventures forth and finds himself in a labyrinth of steam and walls. As he makes his way inside, the doorways seem to vanish, leaving him trapped. Lockhart begins to panic and looks around for an escape. He then notices that the mist clears and leads deeper into the maze. Among the mist, he watches a deer. Following the deer, Lockhart enters the room to find a man sitting on the marble bench, with his head bowed. As he calls to the man, he discovers that it is Pembroke himself. Lockhart urges him to come back. Pembroke says that he is not well, and when Lockhart tries to assure him, Pembroke snaps and says that Lockhart will soon see the truth. When Lockhart tries again, Pembroke walks away and remarks that it is no longer his concern. He goes on to dive into a pool and elaborates that Dr. Heinrich Vollmer insisted that he did not involve himself in business matters. Lockhart attempts to tell Pembroke that the merger is in deep trouble, but Pembroke ignores him and asks Lockhart about his father. A flashback shows a young Lockhart watching his father walk up to the rails of a bridge from the car. Pembroke says that the firm was responsible for what happened to his father. Lockhart says that his father didn't have what it took to survive. Pembroke looks Lockhart in the eye and says he has the sickness worse than any of them. Lockhart walks out, but just then Pembroke seems to reconsider. Lockhart assures him that everyone is concerned for his well-being and that he will only be needed for a couple of days. He agrees, and the next day, Lockhart prepares to leave. Lockhart observes the strange behavior of the patients. He finds the woman he met on his first day here, looking at a building across the grounds. She points out that this was where Baron hung the priest, but when Lockhart mentions the fires, she is surprised. Lockhart acquaints himself with Frank Hill, Mr. Nair, and Victoria Watkins. They invite him to a game of cards, bantering with each other. However, Lockhart says that he is heading back to New York with Pembroke, leaving them stunned. They ask if he is feeling well and seem at a loss for words. As Frank and Nair walk off, a nurse comes up to Victoria to take her away for her treatment. She bids Lockhart farewell and smiles at him. Lockhart walks into a clearing with a pool of water. The young girl he had seen standing on the ledge is bent near the water, humming and dropping morsels into the water. Lockhart asks if she is a patient. The girl says that Vollmer treats her as a special case and asks Lockhart whether he was here for the cure. When Lockhart smiles and says he was just leaving, she stares into his eyes and says that no one ever leaves. Lockhart learns that her name is Hannah. Lockhart rushes to the reception, only to find that there is no one there. He then hurries across the halls to room 609, where he discovers nurses and attendants rearranging the room. Meanwhile, a feast is going on in the dining hall, where Dr. Heinrich Vollmer dines with the doctors. A frustrated Lockhart walks in and demands to know where Pembroke is. Vollmer explains Pembroke had taken a turn for the worse and has been moved to another treatment stage. Lockhart interrogates Vollmer. As Peterson and Vollmer attempt to calm him, he accuses them of making sure that patients never really get better. During his outburst, Lockhart has a nosebleed, and suddenly he falls to the floor. Lockhart is awoken by a flashlight in his eyes, as Vollmer checks for a concussion. As he walks to Vollmer's desk, Lockhart sees Hannah's photo, and Vollmer remarks that she is a special case. When Lockhart asks why, Vollmer explains how she was exposed to severe trauma and suffered developmental delays. He goes on to say that Hannah is like a daughter to him. He tells Lockhart that his body is in severe distress and danger. He continues to extend his services and help to Lockhart, who agrees only to get to the bottom of the wellness center's truth. Lockhart uses Vollmer's distraction with the nurses to steal Pembroke's records. He also spots a necklace with the initials VR engraved on it. When he asks if it belongs to the Baron, Vollmer remarks that the necklace belonged to the Baroness, Vanessa Vollmer. He continues to express his admiration for Baron's scientific intellect and calls a nurse to escort Lockhart to the isolation wing. Before he leaves, Vollmer hands Lockhart a small white urine container, explaining that this is essential to keep track of his progress. Next, Lockhart has his hands and feet bound, spread across a tank-like chamber with a glass window. Outside, doctors stand near the control panel, ready to begin his treatment. The doctors explain how this sensory deprivation chamber aimed to simulate a return to the embryonic stage. Lockhart's eyes widen in panic and distress, while the doctors continue to call the treatment a cleansing of the mind. As Lockhart surrenders himself, flashbacks reveal more about his father's death. Lockhart's treatment supervisor is distracted from his duty by a nurse and decides to give her some treatment. A dog. Meanwhile, Lockhart's chamber reveals a disturbing truth. He finds himself surrounded by eels. He gasps and pounds against the glass, but to no avail. He finally gives in and sinks to the bottom, while a flashback shows his father jumping off a bridge. Lockhart awakens and finds himself surrounded by a nurse and a doctor. When he explains what he saw, he is told that the purifying process can induce visions. Later at night in his room, Lockhart begins to dig through Pembroke's file, but is interrupted by a sound coming from the flush. The next morning, he finds Victoria sitting outside, working on a crossword. She tells him she's been digging into the fires and found out that it was medical experiments that prompted the villagers to riot against the Baron. There were dried-up bodies found in the fields surrounding the castle. As an attendant arrives to take her for treatment, she stops near Lockhart and tells him, "There is a terrible darkness within this place." Lockhart finds his way to Hannah. She rides her bike along the pool. Lockhart assumes that she is going for a swim, but she tells him her condition does not allow her to. Lockhart offers the ballerina to Hannah, and in exchange, she offers to bike into town with Lockhart. As they find their way to a small local pub, Lockhart finds his driver sitting at the bar. Lockhart inquires about a pharmacist in town and is promptly redirected to Peter. He and Hannah share their first drink, as Hannah tells him about her mother's death by fire. Hannah offers him a dose from her blue vitamin bottle, hanging from a chain around her neck. Lockhart leaves her there to find the doctor. Lockhart gives the doctor Pembroke's files and finds out that the cause of Pembroke's condition is chronic dehydration. Lockhart wonders if there is a connection between the mummy's villagers found in fields to what is happening here. The man reveals that the Baroness was infertile and could not conceive. He also shows Lockhart the deer he had crashed into. As the man cuts into its stomach, the deer's innards burst forth to reveal eels and a calf fetus. Back at the bar, Hannah takes a coin from one of the villagers to play a song on the jukebox. The boy begins to get closer to Hannah, revealing nasty intentions. Meanwhile, Lockhart makes his way back to the bar and calls Hank. He finds out that there has been no call from the facility to his office. Confused, he notices the boy groping Hannah and makes his way over, interrupting the dance. He shouts at Hannah, holding up her necklace and asking her what makes her special. The villager starts a fight with Lockhart. Just as he pulls out a knife, Vollmer arrives and takes them back to the facility. Hannah fights with Vollmer, saying that she and Lockhart were only having fun. As she lies down, she experiences a sharp pain in her stomach. Vollmer attempts to soothe her, but is pushed away. However, he ends up assuring her that she will feel better soon and that her father will come to visit. Later that night, a loose tooth leads Lockhart to seek the receptionist's help again. While navigating through the wellness center, Lockhart finds his sanity and sense of reality warped by hallucinations. As he continues his search for Pembroke, he ends up discovering the restricted floor of the facility, where he finds patients submerged in tanks of water, piled like bodies in a morgue, and blue bottles everywhere. Among the patients, he discovers Victoria, who tells him that the Baroness was pregnant the night of the wedding, and before they burned her, the villagers threw the fetus into the aquifer. However, the child somehow survived. She clutches Lockhart's arm hard and forces him back into a shelf of bottles, causing a ruckus. This catches the attention of the attendants, who come to find Lockhart. He narrowly escapes and hides in another room. To his horror, he finds that the walls of the room were lined with water chambers, where patients were submerged, including Pembroke. A mortified Lockhart pounds on the glass and tries to awaken Pembroke, but to no avail. As he rushes to find an escape, he is discovered by nurses and Dr. Vollmer. Lockhart assures them that he is lost and would like to go to his room, but Dr. Vollmer insists that he seek treatment. In the operation theater, Lockhart sits in a chair, surrounded by two attendees and Dr. Vollmer. Vollmer subjects Lockhart to torture for Lockhart's own safety. Before he leaves, he is also seen holding Pembroke's files, suggesting that he has caught up to Lockhart's game. Another patient arrives for treatment with the driver. As the driver has a smoke, Lockhart emerges in his back seat and shouts at him to drive. In the town, at the town police chief's office, Lockhart explains what is happening at the facility. The chief tells him that they will look into everything and pursue his lead. However, just then, Lockhart spots the blue bottle on the chief's shelf. Lockhart grabs a knife to defend himself, as Dr. Vollmer, his attendants, and the chief make their way into the room. When Lockhart reveals that he knows what is going on, he is dismissed as benign delusional and insane. Lockhart's office abandons him as well in light of an SEC investigation into him. As Lockhart wields his knife at the three and declares that he knows about the experiments, Dr. Vollmer continues to gaslight Lockhart into believing. The guilt of his father's death is what's making him act out this way. Lockhart says that Pembroke is dead. However, Dr. Vollmer rebukes this, bringing a very alive Pembroke into the room. Pembroke states that Lockhart tried to take him to New York against his will. Defeated, Lockhart finds himself back at the sanctuary. His sanity starts to unravel as he begins to experience hallucinations. In a hallucination, Lockhart rips out the toilet in his room. As he slowly gives in to the treatment, he writes a letter similar to Pembroke's. As he writes about how the truth cannot be unseen, his clarity returns in a fit as he breaks the glass of water and uses the shard to cut off his cast. Lockhart finds himself wielding a shovel in the catacombs of the facility, desperate for answers. As he makes his way through the dark, watery tunnels, he enters what appears to be Dr. Vollmer's lab. The macabre lab is filled with surgical equipment, grotesque specimens, and cryptic notes. As he goes deeper into the cave, he sees a portrait hung on the wall, which looks eerily like Hannah. Meanwhile, Hannah is in a pure white dress, ready to submerge herself in the pool, signifying that she is ready. As she stands in the pool, she begins to menstruate, and the eel-like fish creep up to her as the blood colors the water scarlet. In the catacombs, Lockhart finds himself near a similar pool and discovers a dead body, dried up. Just then he hears a noise and runs to hide. Lockhart continues to observe as the bodies are dumped in the water by the attendant and fed to the fish. Then, Lockhart is discovered and fights the attendant. A struggle ensues, and he eventually kills the attendant. As he makes his way back to the facility, he finds Hannah, her white dress stained pink, and tries to take her with him. She refuses, running to find Dr. Vollmer in the dining hall. Lockhart follows, and when he is reprimanded for upsetting Hannah, he unveils the truth about the facility. The water is being used to control the patients and feast on their bodies. The patients, in a trance, stand up and make their way to Lockhart. Lockhart begins to smile, hoping that they are finally free. But as they step up to him, they begin to chant, "I am not well," and gather around him. As they begin to claw at his skin, Lockhart shouts in agony. Next, Lockhart awakens as he is being wheeled to the restricted floor. He is locked in a cylindrical chamber with only his head sticking out. He turns to see Pembroke, seemingly at peace with his fate. Lockhart gasps and struggles as Vollmer shoves pipes down his throat. Lockhart confronts Dr. Vollmer, and the truth is finally revealed. The blue bottles of vitamins turn out to be extracted from the patients, who are being used as filters that separate the life-giving essence of the special water that surrounds the facility. This essence is consumed by Vollmer and his people. Vollmer uses Lockhart's purities to dose himself and Hannah the next morning, telling her she is ready now. Next, as a timid and broken Lockhart sits on a bench outside, Hannah finds him and gives him back the ballerina in an attempt to revive his memory and sanity. Later that night, the nurses, clad in white cloaks, stand on the ledges of the sanctuary as Vollmer looks at a radiant but haunting Hannah, dressed in a blue dress, wearing a veil. In his room, Lockhart toys with the ballerina, while outside, Vollmer and Hannah seem to engage in what appears to be a cult-like wedding ceremony. Vollmer takes Hannah's hand and leads her to the lab in the catacombs. He pulls back a curtain to reveal a bed, and tells Hannah this is where she began. Lockhart pieces the terrifying history of the sanctuary together. Meanwhile, deep within the catacombs, Hannah is tied to the bed by Volmer as he reveals that he is the Baron and that Hannah is his child. He tells Hannah that this will be a new beginning and begins to force himself on her. Lockhart arrives and confronts Volmer, who peels off his mask to reveal a gruesome, slime-filled face from when the villagers burned him. Lockhart and Volmer fight before Lockhart, backed into a corner, throws his lighter at the Baron, lighting him and the lab up in flames. As Hannah unties herself, Baron and Lockhart continue to struggle. Lockhart tries to fight him away, but Baron is too strong and strangles him on the edge of the pool. As Lockhart chokes and tries to claw himself free, Hannah calls out to her father and attacks him with an axe to the head. Hannah and Lockhart escape and run into Lockhart's colleagues, who ask him about Pembroke's whereabouts. Lockhart says Pembroke is dead and rides away from the Sanctuary of Horrors with Hannah with a strange smile on his face. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.